Welcome back, everybody, to the Aaron's High Cap Adventure Radio program. Again, it's October 7, 2017. If you want to become part of the show, the number here in the studio is 254-697-6633. Feel free to give me an email at aaronsgunshop@gmail.com. Go to aaronsgunshop.com. Go to the Facebook page. Like us on Facebook. Go to the YouTube channel at Aaron's Gun Shop. Like us. Become a subscriber on YouTube. Lots of great videos there, especially Attorney Benton Ross Watson, Attorney Rick Dodd. We've got great I don't know what you call them, episodes or segments there that you can review with penal codes and all different things that we talk about in the license to carry segment and beyond. So you can check it out. Plus we've got gun demos, the whole works. But right now with me, I've got Super Attorney Rick Dodd. Rick, welcome to the show, first of all.
Hey, it's good to be here. It's always a beautiful day to show up here.
It's
KMIL.
It's like you and Ross are on a rotational basis. You're a tag team match. When one's out, the other one comes in. So it's a great team you guys got going on.
Yeah, I enjoy listening to Ross. He's a good guy, smart fella.
Okay, but now since you're here and I address you as Super Attorney, it brings up a couple things. I noticed here, saw in the paper a couple weeks ago that you were named as a top 100 attorney. Let me say something about that. You're a super attorney, you're a good old boy. There's all these different legal terms given to an attorney. Can you explain this top 100 attorney thing and then how you become all these others?
Well, the main thing is I'm a Cameron yeoman.
That's
graduated
important.
from Ohio, We're still proud of that. And I've been practicing here in Milam County for 35 years. So to become a super attorney or in the top 100, basically what it is a peer review process. In other words, other attorneys nominate you. Super attorney is something that's done by our Texas Monthly magazine group, and the top 100 is a group of national attorneys. I'm more proud, though, of the...
Well, wait, back up. The top 100 of national.
Yes.
How do they... That's very good. What criteria are they using to get you in that status?
They look at... primarily, it's a peer review thing. In other words, other attorneys have to nominate you. So, when you're in the courthouse watching the ballet, other lawyers who know what the ballet should be like is able to have an opinion more so than, say, a client who comes off the street and you do a good job for them one time. So they get to see you a number of times, and that's what puts you into super attorney or the top 100. But, it's just like any other kind of teamwork thing. You have to have a good team, and that's what I'm most proud of. And I think what I've done is surround myself by a good team, and that has actually gotten me into the Newsweek top 10 of the law firms in the United States, right here in Cameron, Texas.
Not to lessen your position as an attorney, one of the top 100 attorneys, but you said something vital: the team.
Yes.
Without the team, you can't make it.
That's absolutely true.
It's like I look at the crew that I've got helping me here with the show. I couldn't do this without everybody involved in it. And so I can understand totally that the team makes the attorney.
That's right. One of the attorneys on my team is double board certified. Like if you were to go have an operation, you wouldn't go to the general practitioner to have a heart transplant. You would go to someone who's board certified in cardiac surgery.
Right.
So Capolino, he's board certified in personal injury trial law and in civil trial law. And we're going to talk a little bit about civil versus criminal in a minute. Another member of my team is Ryan Krebs, and he's a medical doctor. And you can imagine the information and knowledge that he brings into the courtroom when we're working with someone who's been in a bad truck wreck or who's been hurt by asbestos. Craig Brown is another member of the team. He's passionate, and that passion shows through to the jury every day when he gets in front of them. Valerie Farwell, she has been writing briefs and arguing in front of judges for 20 years now, and excellent part of the team.
We're good.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm proud of them.
That's awesome. So how do you want to start this then?
Well, you asked me to come in and talk a little bit about what the difference between civil law and criminal law is. And it's really simple, Matt. Everything that's not criminal law...
Let me guess. It's going to be civil.
That's right. You got it.
So how does it break from civil to criminal? Well, I'm sure you're going to tell us, right?
Yeah, well, that's right. And sometimes those breaks can be confusing. The biggest difference, of course, is criminal law is statutes. In other words, when you break the law, you break a criminal law. And it can be as simple as a speeding ticket, where you get a ticket, and it's still a criminal activity. Mm-hmm. And, of course, it can be a lot more simple, whereas if you kill someone during commission of a felony, you can be executed.
Major extremes, yeah. Class C to execution, I get it. But
yeah, it's a big spectrum there. So civil law, of course, it involves like family law, it involves probate law, contract law, tort law, administrative law, all the other areas where you might go to court. The good thing about those cases is you don't get sent to jail for a criminal offense. Now, the confusion comes in that you can get sent to jail for contempt of court.
What is contempt of court? Like when they say, the judge says, I'll put you in contempt. What is that?
It's not a crime. It's a civil obligation that the judge has put you in jail, but you hold the keys. In other words, is if you do what the judge has told you to do, you're no longer in contempt. And you can sit in jail for weeks, months, maybe even years. If you have the ability to do what the judge has said to do, your civil rights are not violated. And, you know, we see that most often in child support. There's a money tree that grows between the jailhouse and the courthouse. And most of the time when the judge says, well, you're going to go to jail for not paying your child support, they go out and pick some fruit from the money tree and take care of their obligations. Some other examples would be in discovery process that I work with a lot as a civil trial lawyer. I have the right, my clients have the right to look at documents and look at information that the other side may have that is relevant to our case. And if the other side doesn't provide that, the judge may order them to provide that, and he'll give them a certain amount of time. In other words, there's due process. And then if they show up and they say, no, Judge, we're just not going to do it. We're not going to supply copies of our tax information, for instance. And he says, well, I know you can do it, so you're going to go to jail over here on a civil contempt charge until you go ahead and do that. So again, they have the opportunity, they hold the keys, they can get out whenever they want to. Even though it's jail, it's still a civil situation.
What's that? How does that apply on your record? Does it apply on your record, or is it just say?
Okay, so yeah, there's another big distinction. A good question. Only the civil things, the speeding, for instance, or if your woofers and tweeters are a little bit too loud when you drive through town, criminal offense, that goes on your record. The contempt does not. Of course, it shows up at the jail that you were checked in and checked out, but it doesn't go on your criminal record because it's not a crime.
So it's almost, you can't win almost unless you decide to stay in there and hold your ground. Sooner or later you're going to want out, and sooner or later the judge gets what he wants.
That's true. The only other way to get out is to comply with the law or prove that you cannot comply with the law, which means that then you are have a civil violation against you by the court. In other words, your civil rights have been violated.
What if you're put in contempt and then for some reason you're in there as the trial's going on, and then the trial for some reason is over? Are you still stuck in there, or is it like nullify the reason why you're in there?
Well, generally the contempt is not happened during a trial. And in other words, there are some situations where the judge might remove a defendant from the courtroom during a criminal trial because they're making too much noise, being rowdy, in other words, just disturbing the whole general process. But he'll give them a couple of 3 warnings before he removes them. Generally, those kinds of defendants are not out on bail in the first place. So now, going back to jail is like back to home.
If we go to Hollywood, though, you're going to see the attorney getting all riled up, and the judge says, "I'm going to hold you in contempt." Does that ever happen here?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Ross isn't one of those, is he?
Well, I mean,
I know he gets fired up.
I'm not just saying Ross, but I've been there a couple times. It's a chilling thing when the judge says, the jailhouse is right across the street, Mr. Dodd. You need to calm down. Yes, sir, Your Honor.
It's amazing how you humble when you hear those words, jailhouse.
Well, it's just like when you talk to a police officer. It's yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Can you apply any of this? I know you can, but do you have anything off the top of your head that you can apply towards license to carry? Since this is a license to carry segment, a lot of people who have a license may want to know the most common episodes of this, criminal going to civil to criminal, or vice versa.
Well, if you are licensed to carry and you're complying with all the laws, that doesn't mean you will not be arrested. I mean, that's sometimes the officers mistake the fact that you're being legal for a possibility of you being illegal, and you get arrested. So yeah, it's a good idea to have the double shot bail bond number handy in case something like that happens.
Twin pistols, everybody. Twin
pistols. I'm sorry.
That's right.
Twin pistols. Okay.
Are you in jail? Do you need to get out? Remember, call them twin pistol bail bonds.
Yeah, I don't know where I got the double shot. I think that was where the liquor store and the gun store were all
Yeah.
together.
Okay. Hey, I'll tell you what. How about this? This is a great example. You have defense of a third person. Scrap that. You have reckless injury of an innocent third person. I like to use this example in my class.
Reckless injury sounds like a civil situation.
But I want to clarify. Here you are, a person who's unskilled with a weapon. And there's the threat in front of you. And they're not paying attention to the backstop, the people right around this individual. They got a high capacity weapon, handgun, let's say a Glock or something. And because of their lack of training, and they're extremely fearful, and they thought that the paper that allowed them to carry a gun covers everything, the threat comes and they freak out and shoot all 17 rounds. Don't hit the guy, but you got 10 bodies laying on the ground. That's, in my opinion, extremely reckless.
I agree.
As compared to, you have the same person but is trained, knows what they're doing, takes a good clean shot, hits a bone, let's say bounces off one of the bones, comes out a secondary spot in the threat's body, and goes into the cheek of a person standing right next to them. In my humble opinion, that would be civil because it wasn't meant, it was an accident, but I'm still accountable for my rounds.
Well, when you say, in your opinion, that's a good thing that it's your opinion. If you were on the jury, it would be a better thing that was your opinion. Because the jury is charged with determining whether it was reasonable. In other words, what you did, was it reasonable? If, in other words, the person who's a threat was holding that Glock and pointing at you, it might be more reasonable that you fired all 17 rounds than if he was just standing there with a Bowie knife in his hand, 20 yards away. That would be unreasonable. Even if you shot him...
How many yards?
20 yards away.
20 yards? Okay, it's
With
21,
that Bowie
it's 21
knife.
feet. Okay, because it's 21 feet, man, he's getting shot. Because
Yeah.
I know how fast the guy
Well, I
can
understand
run.
that,
Okay.
but even if he's holding, some sort of a buttstock gun and he's fixing to fire it at you, then you might want to go ahead and shoot those 17 rounds. And
But
the jury might decide that was reasonable under the circumstances. Even though you may have missed a whole bunch, and even though you may not have been as good a shot as you thought you were when you started firing those rounds, they still might think that's reasonable. But like I said in some of the segments before, that might be true in Milam County. It may not be true in Harris County.
Is that solely because of the opinion of the jury?
That's right, because the juries are different. And it could be true in Milam County this week, but not next week.
That's crazy, man. That's crazy.
Well, it's 12 different people, and it's the best system in the world.
I love you guys. I love you. I love Ross. But man, I look at this law book and I just want to burn it. It's like, what good is it?
You'd have an awful big fire because right now, over in the federal library, there's 32 feet of codes for the federal statutes.
32 feet of codes.
Yep. It takes up a lot of shelf space.
And that's just federal.
Then in New York State, there's 22 feet of codes. Now this is criminal code, so nobody can ever know everything that's in there. But then you got to remember, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. So you say you want to burn them.
Is that why the person sits in jail so long? They go, we got him on something. I know there's something in that book, that 32-foot long wall of code. I'm going to find something. It's going to take a while. Is that what they do?
Well, no, they can't do that. They have to charge you something relatively quick. And then, of course, one of the rights that you have if you're in jail is the right to a speedy trial. I mean, there are certain protections for criminal defendants.
And if you're lucky, you can get bonded out by twin pistol bail bonds, right? Here
Well,
on camera. Have you been arrested?
Sometimes that's an unlucky thing. I mean, that's for another day. But being in jail, sometimes the sheriff wants you out. So being in jail may not necessarily be a bad thing, depending on how guilty you are or what kind of video they have. But you got to remember there are certain protections that our Constitution gives all criminal defendants, and one of them is no ex post facto. In other words, you can't have done something and then tomorrow the legislature pass a law and say that's illegal, and then you be arrested for what you did the day before that.
Well, can it reverse around? If you did something illegal, they change the law, and then it's okay. Can you get out, or are you still stuck on the old law?
Well, if you do something after the law is in effect, then you're a criminal. If it's a crime.
No, what I'm saying is you did a criminal act, but the next day they changed the law and it said what you did yesterday is no longer against the law. Does it work that way too?
Yes, it does.
Really?
Yes. It does.
I didn't know that. I thought because they're basing you on the actions of laws in place. I thought.
Well, we're seeing, and when I say it works both ways, I think what it means is basically the punishments can be retracted. We're seeing that today in situations where crack cocaine, for instance, was treated differently than regular cocaine. And so they've evened those out in the federal statute. So the folks who had the greater sentence on crack cocaine are now being let out of jail because it was basically unconstitutional what was happening to them under the Equal Protection Clause.
Are they doing that too on death rows? They've adapted or adjusted those who are on death row, depending on what it was. They either change it to life sentences, or is that if you were under 18 or something?
Well, sometimes when the laws that were in place that the jury were charged with determining whether or not you should be put to death or found unconstitutional, then they are commuted to life in prison.
Okay, let's do this. O.J. Simpson just got out not too long ago, so it's fresh in everybody's mind. And he got arrested on that one because
that's one of the more famous criminal trials that we've seen, and actually one of the best examples of the difference between criminal and civil.
Yes, that's what I want to talk about. But just to get us up to date, he got arrested, I think it was 9 years ago, for gun. He had a gun in possession, stealing back supposedly his sports paraphernalia.
Yeah, I think it was burglary, while armed.
Okay.
They call it armed burglary.
Well, obviously before that, he was charged with murder of Nicole, his wife, and
Goldman.
Okay. Now he was being charged criminally, but got off on that, and then was charged civilly. So why don't you explain that, since a lot of people know? And maybe
well,
clarify.
okay. One of the things that another protection is protection against double jeopardy. And to give you an example there, if you were to go in to armed rob the CEFCO and somehow incidentally, I guess is not a good word, but someone was killed during your commission of that offense, they could try you for capital murder. If the jury found you innocent of that situation, they cannot come back and then try you for armed robbery. So typically what they do is they try you for all those offenses at the same time. The prosecutor has to make a decision during that process whether he wants the jury to go back to the deliberation room and say, well, we're not going to find him guilty if everybody will agree to the armed robbery. We're not going to find. So sometimes the prosecutor only gives the jury one choice, and every once in a while it doesn't turn out right for the prosecutor and the defendant walks. But that doesn't apply when you look at criminal versus civil. You can go ahead and try someone for a criminal case and then turn around later and do the civil trial. The difference, of course, is that the civil trial will not result in jailable offense. It's only for about money. And a lot of times people,
I don't understand that, Rick. If you're being charged with a crime and you're not found guilty, how do they come back and get you money-wise on something you weren't guilty of?
Well, that's a simple thing. Being guilty and being responsible are two different things.
Clarify.
Being guilty requires a burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And there's no real number to put on that, but a lot of scholars, legal scholars, will say that means 99% certainty as there is no doubt. In other words, the jury, again, Milam County, Harris County, wherever, that jury is the one that determines what that burden means. But in a civil trial, it's preponderance of the evidence. In other words, more likely than not. So for OJ, the first jury determined that the evidence was doubtful. There was some doubt. There was doubt that was more than beyond the reasonable doubt. But in the civil trial, they said, well, more likely than not, he did it.
Jeez, that's so weird. Man.
Well, I don't think it's weird. I mean,
I understand what you're saying.
You know, in America, we value our freedom. We value our freedom a lot more than money. And in America, corporations, for instance, have been determined to be people. Well, we can't put them in jail. Now, we can fine them and we can hold them criminally responsible and try to take money, but that's not a whole lot different than the civil situation where you can take money. But in the civil situation, you got to remember that the plaintiff is an individual or another corporation, and they can sue for the harm that's been done to them. The harm that's been done to them typically would be like in contract law where the other side breaches the contract. The first party who sues them would be able to make that contract stick. In other words, specific performance, or if they were able to prove the damages cost to them because the contract was not performed, then they can make the other company or individual that they've sued pay those damages, plus their attorney's fees, plus some court cost. In tort law, the damages would include things like mental anguish, physical pain, medical, physical impairment, lost wages, and then the spouse may have a claim for loss of consortium. And of course, you can imagine that that would be very important in situations of death or amputation or a brain injury. We do a lot of brain injuries, so those are important cases. Within those, you have punitive and exemplary situations. That requires a little bit higher burden of proof in Texas, so clear and convincing evidence, which is still lower than beyond a reasonable doubt, but it is important that you're able to punish someone. And that's one of the bailiwicks of criminal law, too, is punishment. Under criminal law, not only are we looking at punishing someone, we're looking at trying, and punishment includes exemplary, in other words, deterrent. I mean, we want to deter the public from being going over to Sefco and robbing it every day because they know something bad can happen to them.
Like death penalty. You don't want to do it because you'll go to...
Well, the death penalty is
almost a safe place
is
to be,
more
right?
of a safety thing for the general public.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another one of the 4 reasons that we have criminal laws is to protect the public, which you call it a deterrent also, because if you put somebody in prison, they're not going to go out and rob, rape, and pillage while they're in prison, supposedly. If you put someone to death, that ends that career.
Mm-hmm.
But those are tough things to deal with. Also, rehabilitation. That's the one that we all like to really think happens in prison, and sometimes it does. And I kind of look at it like the starfish thing. The guy who sees a million starfish on the beach, and he goes out and throws a few of them in, and somebody says, "Well, that's not going to help anything." And he said, "Well, it helps those."
That's true.
So
that's right.
if it does help somebody rehabilitate, that's a great thing.
Hey, can I pause you for a second? I got a question before
Sure.
I forget it, and I've always wanted to ask this. You commit a crime, and you do the time. Why is it when you get out you still suffer if you supposedly did your time? Why does it have to follow you on your record? I understand why, but why should it affect you on your record if you went in and served your time that the public thought was necessary for you to redeem yourself?
Well, again, I don't pretend to be a criminal expert, but the short answer is because you're a criminal. And studies are pretty complete that people who commit crimes are more likely than people who don't commit crimes to recommit crimes.
Can't there... Okay, but everybody makes a mistake. What if they get corrected on their mistake? It haunts them. Can't there be like a second strike? You know how in California had 3 strikes?
Well,
I'm not saying I'm
in
for
those
that.
situations you're talking about the 3 strikes, that means they go to prison forever.
Forever. But my point is, you got some people that make mistakes, and then they're young when they make these mistakes. I know some people around this locale who have made a mistake, and they're going to grow up and say, that was pretty stupid, but they're going to be good to go the rest of their lives, but they got this thing following them.
Well, a lot of times the prosecution in most counties in Texas will notice this mistake. And the mistakes are pretty obvious when you use the word young and, first time offense. A lot of times when you see an 18-year-old who goes to jail or prison, it's because they have an extensive juvenile record that the judge looks at in the pre-sentencing. So the prosecutor has some discretion, the judge has some discretion. And one of the things they can do for a first offender is put them on what they call deferred adjudicated probation, so that if they live out the terms of that probation, they are never convicted. In other words, the adjudication of conviction has been deferred. That's used a whole lot. But once they are convicted, they then become a criminal, and yes, it does follow them. A lot of the
Yeah, but you
elements of what you say follows them for their life eliminates itself after about 10 years.
But the way you explain it makes sense. I just wasn't thinking far enough in advance, but that makes sense. If you got this record and you're proven, as compared to every now and then you're going to have somebody who may not have a record but gets busted and is put in the slammer, but it was one of those things that they get out of it and they're going to become great citizens, but they got to have this follow. But the way you explained it, I get it.
I mean, you still have the right to live a right to live under our Constitution when you get out of prison. So it's not all bad. But yeah, there are some situations. I mean, there's been some legislative proposed about allowing people to vote, even though they have a felony conviction. We have a lot of things that have been written about that. There's a book called the New Jim Crow Laws that I read recently that talks a lot about that. And you know, it's just one of those things where our legislators have to get together and agree on it. And right now, they don't agree on much.
Trey, how much time I got?
About 30 seconds.
Rick, it's always a pleasure to have you on here with such great information. What do you want to say in the last 30 seconds here to sum it all up, or if people can contact you? Because we'll have this up on video probably by Monday or Tuesday.
Sure. Well, of course, they can look at respectforyou.com, or they can give us a call at 1-800-460-0606. We hope you never need us, but if you do, we're there, sort of like an emergency room doctor.
That's great. These guys are great, everybody. You know, next week, don't forget, call us up with questions. It's free to access these guys, and they'd love to talk to you. So until we come back, enjoy the commercials. We'll be back on the other side, and we'll be going over some points of interest.
Yeah, we may not steer you right, but we sure won't steer you wrong.
Here you go.